Hopefully, like me, you've had a great start to your chili season with fantastic germination. If you've not yet started your chili seeds, don't worry, there's still plenty of time, but today we're going to be talking about how to care for your very, very early chili seedlings. There's a few things about chili seedlings that you've got to do differently, so stay tuned and make sure you don't miss any. During episode 1 of this chili growing guide, I'll link that in the description if you haven't seen that. Do go and watch that if you're still early in the stage. I talk a lot about sourcing your seed, how to get best germination, and the things you're going to need throughout the season. And in that video, I mentioned that the two probably most important things are heat and light, because in this country we have a comparatively short growing season in the UK. That is, for these very long season plants, they take a long time until you get a crop. And heat is still really important at this stage. When you're trying to germinate, you want to aim as close to 30 degrees C as possible, and that's still a comfortable growing range for these tiny little seedlings. Between 20 and 30 is what you want to aim for. So if you're in a very cold room, this is our office, which is our warmest room. It's where we spend most of our day working, so it's heated, and it runs around 21 degrees Celsius. You know, it's our nice cozy room. But if you're in a room that's a bit cooler, the cost of electric and heating is kind of crazy at the moment, what you might want to do is leave your heated propagator on, or leave them on a heat mat or something like that, because that is going to rise and encourage growth. The cooler it is, the slower your plants are going to grow, and you really want them nice and comfortable to be putting on this early growth so you get nice big plants by the end of the season. My chili growing year is off to a fantastic start. I'm really pleased with the germination. I've had close to 99% germination, and if you followed my advice from episode 1, you should too, as long as you've gone to a reputable seed seller. Once again, most of my seeds have been from Chili Chump this year, so fantastic YouTubing channel and chili seller. I'll link them in the description. And B, the early initial kind of growth. Chili peppers can be really delicate at this stage, and they can grow really slowly. Mine were all sown on the 6th of January. Today of recording is the 31st of January, so they're between kind of 15 and 20 days old, these plants. They could be a little bigger, they could be a little less leggy. We'll talk a little bit about light as we go through this video, but I'm really pleased. They look really healthy. They're moving in the right direction. If you haven't started your chili seeds yet, or if yours are looking a little behind mine, do not worry. January and February were still very early in the year. I would say aim to get your chili seeds started by the beginning of February to the middle of February, but even if you don't quite miss that, you can still get a nice chili plant by the end of the year. One thing to mention, I have had a few little mishaps here and there. One thing, I forgot to turn the light on until 12 o'clock at noon one day, so the plants got a little leggy then. I'm all kind of manual. The other thing you do want to do with germination is get a fan on your chili seedlings. And I use this really ugly thing, which I've just put out of shot because I didn't want it in the shot. But yeah, I just turn this on manually for an hour or so each day and give them a little blast, and it just helps to strengthen your seedlings so much. But I am doing a lot of things manually. I don't have timers set up, and it would improve the grow if I did that. So let's talk a little bit about lights. I'm no expert when it comes to grow lights. I leave that to the professionals. Once again, I'll link some fantastic videos on grow lights in the description. This is a very powerful light, but you don't necessarily need that for chili seedlings. I love this thing because it will get me through my full kind of up till April, until the frosts have died back and I can get my chili plants out. But if you can, you should probably aim for around 16 to 14 hours a day for chili plants. They really do love a lot of light. When they're first coming out in their just tiny little seedlings, when it's just their first leaves, they're a lot more sensitive. So you need to kind of build them up. And one thing to look out for when you're using artificial grow lights, two things really. One, the plant's getting leggy, getting tall, getting thin, stretching for the light. And the second is if they're getting a little bit of purpled leaves. Some chili varieties, like this Zimbabwe Black, they start off with black, dark cotyledons. It's a kind of feature. But if you see it on some of your other seedlings, where it's not a known feature, that's probably a sign that they're getting a bit too much light, and it's kind of like a sunburn reaction. It's a sign that the plants are a little bit stressed and you're probably giving them too much light. So either you need to turn the light down on the dimmer or increase the distance. And one thing about the cell tray method is that it can be quite tricky, because I've got some seedlings here which are much older. They need a bit more light rather than the tiny little cotyledons that have just started poking out on the late germination. So on those baby plants, I'm seeing a lot of that sunburning, and it's a tricky balance trying to give the older plants what they need whilst not completely frying the baby plants. Down here, underneath the big shelf, we've got a little backup shelf, and this is just some flowers at the moment, and this is one of the kind of purple, people call them octopus lights. They're about 20 or 30 quid, and I've seen people start chilies under these very successfully. So this might be all you need, but this isn't going to give you maybe as much coverage, control, or reliability as a proper, quote unquote, proper grow light. Seedlings are going to need heat, light, and now at this crucial stage, more than ever, they need water. And what I like to do is always make sure I'm avoiding cold shock. I try and water with rainwater where I can because it's generally going to be a nicer pH for your plants, but I like to bring it inside, bring it up to room temperature before I water. And the other thing I like to make sure I'm doing is bottom watering. Maybe the first water or the second water when you've got your germination, you can do a little bit of top watering, but I think it really pays to start bottom watering as soon as possible to get your plants encouraged to look for water, get that root growth going, train them to start looking for water, because that way the plant is going to build a better, stronger and healthier root system in the long run. I know people are going to ask how often should you water, but that really just depends on how much water your plants are using, how far they are in their development, your substrate, how much it holds onto water, how warm your room is, how much is evaporating. There's a lot of different factors. So it could be anywhere between kind of every 2 days if it's really drying out, or every 7 days if they're kind of holding onto it. It might even be more. What you got to do is get used to the weight of your trays. Get used to giving them a little lift up. I just watered this yesterday, so it's very, very heavy. And the other thing to do is you can just investigate the bottom of the cells. You know, you can lift them up, feel them with your finger, put your finger in the top a little bit, you can feel. You can buy a moisture meter if you want to, but you're going to get a feel for it. One thing to watch out for, very, very common problem with chilies is overwatering. And the way that they tell you they've been overwatered is generally with a bit of leaf yellowing, which can be tricky because that's also what they do when you've underwatered them. Generally, if you're underwatering, then the plants are going to let you know first by drooping a little bit and becoming quite wilted. You're not going to get such a warning with the overwatering. It's one to watch out for, and chilies generally like a bit of a wet-dry cycle, so they don't like to be saturated. If you've got some slow growth, maybe you might be overwatering. And just a quick note to say as well, most of this advice goes for sweet peppers as well as hot peppers. One thing that is different about sweet peppers though, they're generally much thirstier. And that's true for any kind of chili pepper as well, which is thick-fleshed. So if you think of something like a jalapeno, that's got a nice, juicy, thick pod, and that's going to be a thirstier plant. It's a mistake I've made often, is treating those big, thick plants, the mild peppers, more like a chili that's got a thin skin and is less thirsty. But generally that's more of a problem for later down the line when you're into your bigger pots. Another quick thing to mention, pests and problems to look out for. The number one pest that you do not want to see on a baby chili seedling is aphids. And if you've started in a controlled environment indoors, you're pretty unlikely to have aphids about. But if you're growing on your peppers next to established plants, or maybe some things that you've overwintered, then that can be an invitation to aphids. And this time of year, you're not going to have any aphid predators. They're going to be in a nice warm environment. There's going to be nothing stopping them just going crazy and completely swamping your plants. A few aphids here and there later on in the season isn't going to be the end of the world, but if their population explodes and gets out of control, they can really damage your pepper plants because they burrow into the plant and kind of take all the nutrition out. Another one that you'll see complained about all the time is a little tiny bug called a fungus gnat, a tiny little fly. They're really, really small, and I've got a few. I've used some slightly older compost and they were obviously in there. Fungus gnats have been known to eat plant roots, but generally I find that they don't set me back too much. I quite often have to deal with them, and it's more of a nuisance than it is a massive concern about my plants. If you can avoid them though, I would. A fun little thing that you sometimes get with freshly germinated peppers is something we like to call helmet head. It's basically where the seed casing gets stuck to the cotyledons, which means that the plants can't open up and absorb light. The best way to deal with this isn't to physically remove the seed casing because that can damage the cotyledons when the plants are at probably the most sensitive, crucial part of development. But keeping it really humid, maybe spritzing it with a bottle or putting one of your moisture retaining shot glasses from episode 1 on the seedling is going to help to loosen that helmet head and give the plant that extra little bit of strength training, you know, as they learn to kind of push and go through that little first trial of their life. And if you're experiencing very little growth, especially after you get to around this stage where you've got your first set of true leaves, but the second aren't really coming and you're not sure what's going on, I would advise first looking at your compost mix, looking at your texture. Have the plants got everything they need? Right amount of water, right amount of temperature, right amount of light? If all of that is true and you've still got some problems, then maybe it's time to look at some fertilizer. You're probably going to have started these in a relatively low nutrient mix, medium. So if you feel like it's necessary, you can go with a really diluted seaweed fertilizer to hopefully give your plants a little bit of a boost. I don't tend to do that with the seedlings. If I notice that there's a problem, then my first solution really is potting on, and that's what we're going to be talking about in next episode. Thank you ever so much for watching. I really hope you found this useful. Let me know if you think there's anything I missed, or if you've got any questions, ask me in the comments below. An extra special thank you to all of my Chilli Pepper tier patrons: Tony, Bill, Pam, Louise, Mel, Michael, Denise, Socks in the Garden, Andrew, and Sarah. Thank you ever so much for watching. Hopefully I'll see you again next time.